We are going to learn now how to calculate party system closure. And we are going to do it for the Czech Republic, a country that democratized in 1992. And we are going to calculate it from the moment of its democratization until the end of last year, 2016. The first thing we need to know is that, as you already know, alternation, formula and access are the three main features or components of a party system closure. Let's try to calculate each one at a time. The first thing we need to see is that the first government in the party system is always the so-called funding government, the government we will be taking into consideration, starting in our calculations. We also need to see that between 1992 and 1996, there were no changes in the structure of competition, there were no changes of government. So the index in all of the different features gets 100, the maximum score, meaning that there were no changes, that the structure of competition remained stable during that time. In 1996, we get the first time there is a governmental change and also a change in the structure of inter-party competition. In order to calculate alternation, the first thing we need to do is to look at Patterson index of ministerial volatility. Basically, it's the same as your formula of Patterson index of volatility, but instead of using percentage of votes, we use percentage of ministers. In this way, we first compare the percentage of ministers for each of the parties in the second government with the percentage of ministers with each of the party in the first government. In this particular case, we need to consider as well that ODS and KDS merged before 1996. This means that, like in the case of volatility, when there are mergers, I'm sure you remember, we have to compare ODS current score, or in 1996, or percentage of ministers, with the sum of the percentage of ministers of ODS and KDS in 1992. So this means that we have 50 minus 52.6 plus 10.5. This gives a score of 13.1. And we know that we need to have absolute values, so we can already convert it in the column next to it. The second party that we need to compare is the Christian Democratic Party, KDU, that in 1986 got 25% of ministers against 21.1 in 1992. So 1996 compared with 1992, and we get 3.9 difference. Finally, ODA, that got 25% of ministers in 1996, and we made a difference with 1992, that is 15.8, and we have 9.2. These are the difference in the percentage of ministers from one government to the previous one. Once we have this, we know the formula. We have to add everything up, so we can do it manually, but we can also use the automatic formula, and we get a score on 26.2. To finalize the formula, we need to divide this by 2, so 26.2 divided by 2, and we get a final score of 13.1. Because we know that the index of alternation goes from 15 to 100, we need to convert this, so we get a score that is over 50. This means that we simply do 100 minus 13.1, and we get a score for alternation in 1996 of 86.9. We continue looking at alternation. We will do each of the features at a time, so you start to understand the mechanisms better for each of the features. 1997, there were no changes in the pattern of competition, so the index gets 100 in all of the different features. 1998, we have again a change in government and therefore a change in the structure of competition. Let's see to what extent the alternation was wholesale or partial. Here is very easy, and it can be done clearly automatically, because we have a total alternation. We have that none of the parties in the previous government are in the current government, and none of the parties in the current government are in the previous government, of course. This means that the index, because it's a wholesale alternation, gets a 100 score. Between 1998 and 2002, we get no changes at all. This means, again, that the index gets a 100 points in all of the different dimensions. We get now to 1992, and we see that there has been partial alternation, like in the case of 1986 in comparison with 1992. This means that we have to use, once again, Patterson index of ministerial volatility. Here we have also used it, only that, it's so obvious that you don't need to make the calculations. So let's see 1992 compared to 1998. Let's clear the contents here and start with the calculations. First, we have 64.7 minus 100 from the socialists, the difference between 2002 and 1998. We know that we need absolute value, so we make this conversion. There were no Christian Democrats in 1998, so basically it would be 17.6 minus 0. You don't need to do that, you can just put the absolute values in the next column. And the same with the liberals, USDEU, 17.6. Then you add all this up and divide it by 2. We have 35.3, and once again, because it's below 50 points, we need to make the conversion in order to put it within the range that the index of alternation has, what is from 50 to 100. So we do like that, and then we have the final score for alternation in the year 2002. Between 2002 and 2007, there were no changes in the government and in the pattern of competition. So we see that we get a similar 100 points score for all the different features of closure. We arrive then to 2007, where we see that we have again partial alternation. The Christian Democrats are both in 2007 in 2002. Let's do then the calculations. ODS was not in the previous government, so clearly it's 56.3 minus 0, so 56.3. The Christian Democrats were, so we need to look at the difference in the percentage of ministers from one government to the next, is 7.4. The Greens were not except in the previous government, so we have already done this. Let's check if there are parties in the previous government that were not in the 2007 government. We have two. We have the CSSD, that is the Social Democrats of the Czech Republic, so their percentage of ministers is 64.7, and finally the Liberals, USDEU, 17.6. We add up all this and divide 164.8 by 2. Because here you see the score is above 50, is within the range of the index of alternation, we just need to put and cut and copy the score. Okay? Let's see, was there any change in 2008? No, there was no changes in 2008. There were no changes in 2009. This means that the index gets a 100 for all the years in the feature, all these years in the three features. 2010, we see that there was again partial alternation because the ODS, the Liberal Conservatives, were kept in government, were in the government. Once again, we do what we already know. We have to compare ODS, 42.9 in 2010 minus 56.3 in 2007, and obviously use absolute numbers. Because the other parties were not, neither the ones in 2007, 2010, and vice versa, we just simply take into consideration their percentage of ministers, because it will be minus 0. So the result is the percentage of ministers in the government. They were minus 0. And these are the absolute values. You add this up and divide it by 2. And we get an index over 50, so we just copy the index. Look, Look at this index. This means that although it was partial alternation, it was very close to wholesale alternation. The same with these ones. While these ones, it was more close to partiality than wholesale. So when you have less than 100, it is obvious that it's partial alternation, but thanks to the index, you can make a gradation of which type of partiality are getting in terms of alternation. 2011, there were no changes in none of the features, so they get a score of 100. And in 2012, we have again a change. Here we see that there is partiality. We can already see that it will be very close to wholesale alternation, but it's still partial, and we need to do the calculations. So we have to do 42.9 minus 42.9, what is basically 0. Later we have to do 35.7 minus 28.6, what is basically, 7.1, okay? And later we have the parties that basically were swapped, 28.6 from the public affairs party, and from leading 21.4. When we do these calculations, we get 57.1 as a sum, but we put it here, and we need to divide 57.1 by 2. Because we have, a score below 50, we do 100 minus 28.6, and you get a score of 71.4, okay? So as you can see, it was partial, but it was not as partial than in 2010 or in 2002. Between 2012 and 2014, there were no changes, so basically what we need to do is to put 100 in all the features. In 2013. In 2014, there was a change, so between 2012 and 2014, there were no changes, so 2013 gets the maximum score in all the different features. In 2014, there was a change, and we see that it was a total change. We could make the calculations using the formula, so it will be 50 minus 0, 31.3 minus 0, 18.8 minus 0, 42.9 minus 0. But because we know that it was wholesale alternation, the percentage that we are going to get, final score, is 100. Wholesale alternation, meaning that there was no alternation. Between 2015 and 2016, not that there was no alternation, that there was a total alternation. Between 2015 and 2016, we get no changes. So we have already calculated the basic scores for alternation. We will still need to standardize it in order to make this formula that goes from 50 to 100 to go from 0 to 100 and be able to combine it with formula and axis. Two indexes that go from 0 to 100. But we will leave this to the end. Let's go now to calculate formula. What we said that formula was. Formula looks at the governing formula, meaning to what extent the governing formula is familiar or innovative, to what extent the same type of parties govern together, form coalitions in government or not. Let's see the first case. In the first case, what we see is that the same parties were in government in 1996-1992. You would say, well, not KDS, but in reality, KDS was in government also in 1996, as it merged with ODS before 1996. So in reality, we have a totally familiar formula. You see, the same parties were in 1996, and in 1992. So the index gets 100, total familiarity. In 1992, we get the Social Democrats for the first time in history, and the party gets for the first time to form the government, and therefore there is a totally innovative formula, and the score of formula gets 0. In 2002, we see that there is not such, innovation anymore. What we see is that part of this government was before, but because the Social Democrats and the Christian Democrats were never together in government, and not even, of course, with the liberals, there is a totally innovative formula. You see, CSSD, who was already in government before, gets a coalition with the Christian Democrats, who were already in government before, but none of them were together in government. So the governing formula is totally innovative, and this part is totally new, so it's not taken into consideration in the calculations of formula. So once again, we get a 0 in the sense of innovative formula. But look at what happens in 2007. 2007, we have two parties that were together in government before, in 1996 and in 1992. So what we do is simply to add up the percentage of ministers for these two parties. So we add up 56.3 with 25. And we get, 81.3, that is the score for formula. 2010, we have ODS against in government, but not with any of the parties that have been in government before. It's the first time that ODS is with Top 09 and Public Affairs, VV. Therefore, the governing formula is innovative. In 2012, we have that ODS and Top 09 have been together before in formula, so you already know what you have to do. You add up the percentage of ministers for these two parties, and you get a score of 78.6 in formula. And in 2014, you have to look. You have the Social Democrats with the Populist ANO and with the Christian Democratic Party. Do you remember Christian Democratic Party, Social Democratic Party? Where do we have them before? Not in these years, here in 2002. So it's a familiar formula. It's not so familiar as if all the parties were together before, but we have to add up the parts that are familiar. So we have 50 and 18.8. So we have all the scores for all the years for the familiarity of the governing formula. Let's look at access. Access is the simplest of all the three features. What you get here basically is to look at which parties were in government before. In 1996, all the parties had been in government before. You see? In 1992 they had been. So access gets a maximum score of 100. In 1998 is the first time of the Social Democrats in government, so it gets a 0. In 2002, there were two parties that were in government before, so you had to add up their, percentage. Look at the distinction. One thing is access. CSSD was in government before, the Christian Democrats were in government before, they get 82.3, but look what it was formula. They were never together before. So that's why formula gets a 0 and access get a rather high score, 82.3. That is, there is a difference between access and formula. Of course, every time you get access a 0, you will get, formula a 0, because those parties were never in government before. But not every time that you get a 0 in formula, you have to have a 0 in access. 2007, we go and look. Which were the parties that were before in government? You have the ODS and KDU, who were together also. So they get a same score like in formula here, 81.3. That is the sum of 56.3 and 25. In 2010, we get that only ODS had been in formula before, had been in government before. You see, once again, formula and access are different. In 2012, these two who were already before, they are in coalition, and leading was never in government. So you get 78.6, that is the sum of 42.9 and 35.7. And finally, we get 2014, where the Social Democrats and the Christian Democrats were in government before, but not ANO, who was in government for the first time. So now we have scores for all the features, all the countries, all the years within the Czech Republic party system. What we need to do is to add up all these years into a final, we need to do the average, okay? So we add up, we basically look at the mean for all these three features. So this is 94.2, in reality 0.3 is basically, you will see, let me round it, we rounded up all these numbers. We can put it in bold in order to see that, it's almost final scores. You see, what we get here is basically 94.3 is the mean of all the years for alternation. For closure, we get, for formula, we get 84.5, and for access, 89.7. We said that because alternation goes from 50 to 100 and the two other indexes from 0 to 100, we need to standardize alternation in order to later find the average, the mean of the three features. For that, we need to use the following formula. So basically it's alternation minus 50 multiplied by 2, okay? Alternation minus 50 multiplied by 2. This is the formula that we need to apply. So what we do is, apply this formula that is there, okay? So alternation, so age 27 minus 50 multiplied by 2 in brackets, and we get the standardized value for alternation. And now we have the standardized value for alternation, the value for formula, value for access. In order to finally have the closure score, to see to what extent the Czech party system is closed, we just need to do the mean of all these values. So it's basically L27, alternation standardized, plus formula, that is, E27, plus J27, that is access, divided by 3. So the Czech Republic is a rather close party system, at least in post-communist standards, and you will see is 86.6 score, final score of closure for the Czech Republic. This was the country 2, okay, in the exercise that I was thinking doing one seminar for the week 2. Do you want to do another country? Let's try to see to what extent you really understand what I have just explained. Let's look at country 3, that is Kosovo. That is the latest democratic or independent country that we can find in Europe. It got independence before 2008. The first democratic elections, we can say, was 2008. The founding government we then consider to be 2008. You can always look at first and, filling in those spots where there were no changes, so then you know which are the places where you need to really make the calculations. For example, between 2008 and 2011, there were no changes, so you can already put the scores for these 2 years in the index. 2011 there were changes. Between 2011 and 2014 there were no changes, so you put 100. Between 2015 2016 there were no changes. Let's go and check alternation. What you see in Kosovo is a very clear pattern of partial alternation. So let's go and check how we apply the total minister volatility, so Patterson index of volatility using the percentage of ministers. 2011. We have PDK in 2011 and we have PDK in 2008. So we just simply do the difference between these two parties, percentage of ministers, and look at the absolute value. SLS was also in the previous government, so we have to do the difference once again. And you look at the absolute value. The next party, LDK-IR, so Democratic League of Kosovo, Ibrahim Rugova, was not in the previous government, so it's it will be 9.5 minus 0, so 9.5 clearly. AKR, it was not, so it will be minus 0. ADK was not in the previous woman, but KDTP, that is the Turkish Democratic Party Kosovo, was. So we need to do 4.8 minus 5.6 and use the absolute value. The PSD, the Social Democratic Party of Kosovo, was not in the previous government, the same as the Justice Party. And we have already checked all the governments in all the parties in the government in 2011. However, look at 2008. Aren't you missing one party in 2011? PDK is already also in 2011, SLS, the Independent Liberal Party, is in 2011, and the Turks are also in 2011. But the second main party in Kosovo, LDK, the Democratic League of Kosovo, is not there. Therefore, we need to look at the difference. 33.3 in 2008 minus 0 in 2011 gets a score of 33.3. Now that we have all this, we simply apply the formula once again. We do the adding and divide it by 2. Because of course we expect a lot of partiality, and because this score is below 50, we just do 100 minus 34.2, and you get the score for alternation, which, as we know, we later will need to standardize, but for the time being we have 65.2. And let's go and see formula. Which parties in 2011 were together in government in 2008? Are there any? I'm sure you know, I'm sure you see. The PDK, the Democratic Party of Kosovo, the Independent Liberal Party, and the Turkish Democratic Party of Kosovo were together in government. So what we need to do is to add up the percentage of ministers of the parties that form part of the familiar formula in 2011, meaning 52.4 of PDK, 14.3 of SLS, 4.8 of the Turkish Democratic Party. These three parties were already before in government, but none of the others were before, meaning that here formula and access have the same score. I hope you understand the mechanism. Let's go to see access in 2014. Which parties were in government before of all those in 2014? LDK, yes, they were already in 2008. PDK, both in 2011 and 2008. The Serbian list, do you see them? No, they were not. The Democratic Alternative Kosovo, yes, they were in 2011. The Turks, they were also like PDK in the previous two governments. The Democratic Party was in 2011. And the Movement for Integration and the Coalition Back, they were not. So we have basically PDK 39.1. We have, LDK 39.1, PDK 26.1, Serbian list no, Democratic Alternative of Kosovo yes, 5.3, the Turks, of course, they have been always in government, 4.3, The Democratic Party, okay, also because they were in 2011, and none of the others. So Serbian List, LB Movement for Integration, and Coalition Backup, they were not. The score for Access in 2014 is 78.1. And now we have to look at the percentage of ministers of the party that were in government before together. Okay? So we have LDK, PDK, and KDP were in government before. Okay? So 3 parties, they were in government before together in 2008. We also have that PDK, ADK, KTDP and PD were together in government before in 2011. Here we have a conflictual, let's say, a familiarity. We have familiar formula of 3 parties that were together in government in 2008, 4 parties that were together in government in 2011. Which one do we choose? Which one do you think the voters, the elites will remember closer? Of course, here we have, because Kosovo, democratized, very, very late in 2006, 2007, and the party system started in 2008, there is memory of every single government. But in other countries, like for example, Switzerland, that goes back to the 19th century, even if you have conflicting situations, which one do you think that the current voters will remember more? Of course, and the current elites, they will remember the closest in time. So, which is the closest in time? The combination of PDK, ADK, KTDP, and PD, that they were together in 2011. For that reason, we look at 26.1 plus 4.3 plus 4.3 plus 4.3. You see? So it's PDK 26.1, ADK 4.3, KTDP 4.3, PD 4.3, 4 parties that were in government together before in 2011. So we get the score for formula. Let's look at alternation. We have, of course, partial alternation, so we have to look at each of the parties. LDK, they were not in government in 2011. So it's 39.1 as the final score for this party. PDK was in government before, 26.1 minus 52.4, in government before, meaning of course the previous government. Because Patterson Index of Ministerial Volatility Alternation just looks at the difference between the current government and the previous one. Okay? So this is the absolute score for PDK difference. Later we have SLS and SL. Both are different and both were not in the 2 governments. So SLS was in 2011, not 2014, so it gets 1443. SL, the Independent Serbian List, was in 2014, not in 2011. So you get 13 minus 0, so basically 13. Let's continue. ADK. ADK, they were in government before, so 4.3 minus 4.8, what gets an absolute value of 0.5. The Turks, very similar result, 4.3 minus 4.8, once again 0.5 the absolute value. The same happens, you see, with the PD, 0.5. LB was not before in 2011, 4.3, the same with the backup coalition. So we are done with all the parties in 2014, but we have to look at also party 2011. We have already done SLS, okay, because we had to compare it because of so close acronyms with SL, sorry. We have the Ibrahim Roba LDK, you see here, they were not in government before, 9.5. AKR, New Kosovo Alliance, they were not in 2014, okay, 4.8. ADK, we have already done it. The Turks, we have already done it. PSD, the Social Democrats, were not in 2014, and the Democrats were already there. So we already have the difference in the percentage of ministers for all the parties, and as usual, we do the adding, and we divide this score by 2. Here is clearly over 50, is basically 61%, and we get all the scores for all the years for the different features of closure. Now, the same operation as we had before. We have to basically have the mean of every single year, every single dimension, sorry. Okay. I usually like always to round it to the first decimal. We know that we need to standardize alternation. Do you remember the formula? So basically it was alternation minus 50 multiplied by 2, okay? Alternation minus 50 multiplied by 2. So it's basically H11, that is alternation, minus 50 multiplied by 2. Okay, so the standardized value of alternation is 81.7. We just simply can do this also. There are different ways of finding the averages, you see, so it should be 88.1. But let's do it manually. So basically alternation is standardized plus formula plus access divided by 3. And we get 88.1 as we were supposed to do. Final score of closure for Kosovo, 88.1. If you compare it with Czech Republic, we see that the Kosovar party system is closer, so it's more institutionalized than the Czech party system. Why is this so? Basically because of the dominant position of the so-called two parties, Democratic Party of Kosovo and also the Democratic League of Kosovo in the case of the newly independent country. But we, of course, talk about, what determines, the institutionalization of these two different party systems, the different institutionalization of the different party systems later in the course. Thank you very much. I hope, this video will help you to really understand how to calculate closure. I know it is a bit difficult, but you have to go step by steps. You have also the instructions on the website Who Governs. Please go ahead, check, do your calculations, do country 4 if you want, is Sweden, send them to me and I will be happy to correct them. Thank you very much and see you soon.